Are we on? Okay. Right, well, hello and welcome to the War Room's Daily Debrief. I am your host, Josh George Smith, formerly of TSM and Fnatic. With me, I have Shakarez, content manager for LOL King and former coach analyst, as well as Nasser, aka Empire, formerly of Energy and current head analyst for Misfits. So I'm just going to go over a little bit about how this show is going to work. So we're going to be covering the day one of the World's Group stage. We'll be covering some games in considerably more depth than other games, but we'll be touching on each of the games in turn. We have some clips to show you, and one of the things I want to highlight is at the end of the stream, we'll be taking questions, probably from Twitch chat. But if you want to tweet at either me or Nasser, then definitely, you could do that as well. So, yeah. Unfortunately, Shakarez has been the unfortunate soul to have to deal with all the production issues, which is unfortunate we'll be late. So apologies for that, but let's get started straight away. So I think we should talk a little bit, just before we even start any of the groups, just talk about how our expectations were, what our expectations were going into day one, and what I think the results were compared to what we expected to happen. Because, I mean, for me, I did not expect a day one like this.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, like what I said in episode 1, that anything can happen in best of ones, and when you have such a large gap between the last time we see these teams play and where they are now, and a few tweaks in the patches, everyone brings in like their own style of play, their own like champion pools. No one's really comfortable playing each other, so and you just get what we saw yesterday.
Yeah. So okay, let's just jump right into it. Yeah. 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 Actually, I'm pretty proud of what my predictions were. So if we ignore my the pick'ems and stuff, one of the things what we talked about on Warrior episode 1, I think I pretty accurately described how each game was going to go. Even if the end result wasn't exactly what I said it would be, I think what's more important is how the game went, and I think I spoke pretty accurately about how the team's performance would be. I think. One of the things I talked about with regards to G2 CLG is, there were questions about does CLG have too good coordination for the G2, and is Expect even going to show up? And I think some of the things that we saw from G2 CLG. I mean, let's go there actually. Let's talk about G2 CLG. So, Shaka, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, my mic was muted. I think it's good now. I forgot to unmute on OBS, but I should be good now. If it's too loud or too low, let me know in the chat, because I can see chat right now. But yeah. So G2 CLG, that was my first wrong prediction. I mean, we just saw a G2, I think, with kind of the same problems as they had before. Also, I thought it was kind of weird that they put Expect on a carry role and gave them all the money. The only real time we've seen him on a carry role was when they put him on Gangplank, and it's a very different kind of carry role.
Yeah,
that champion you just have to wait and scale.
Exactly. You just scale, you can get solo kill 2 or 3 times. It doesn't really matter. It's part of the lane.
Whereas Jace, you have to get ahead.
Exactly.
You have to snowball. I think the key word here we're looking at is snowball. Like with GP, there's no obligation to snowball at all, because you're just looking to not be snowballed on. But with Jace, like, you get a lead that has to turn into something extra. Like, you have to develop that. You have to translate that lead into something bigger. Otherwise, the Jace kind of, it just doesn't have as much of an impact with no pressure as GP does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
But
and like the biggest thing for me was, what was Trick doing? I mean, like, we might as well bring up the first clip. This show.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys remember, Trick had some really good pathing to path towards topside in his first route to get the gank off of Darshan, and that went great because like Jace, Expect played that lane pretty well early on, got Poppy low, and then Trick just came up, Poppy face checked the brush, and he got a kill. But then after that, Trix went to his Gromp, got that one camp,
Yeah,
and recalled. And then and then let's look at what he does after that.
So
you
apologies
can.
for my production, but this should be more or less it. I think it's 451 is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, about 451, 448.
So yeah, when I can play, it's 451 right now. Whenever I can play it, tell me.
Yeah, just play it, and the viewers can watch what happens. So what he does is, I think he wanted to start wolves and then like continue jungling, but when he saw Xmithy on the ward on the tri-brush, he decided to just go straight top and then sit in the lane brush. And what happened was he just leashed some experience, and while Xmithy just went like continued his like normal pathing.
I think this actually. Sorry to interrupt, but I think this actually bites Expect in the ass when he has to flash away from Poppy level 6, because he takes a tower shot and then he like he.
Wait, are you showing? Sorry,
No, I'm showing. I'm showing the trick being top and then losing a lot of time. But he leashed enough XP where Poppy got level 6 first, I think.
Oh, okay. Was that?
Oh yeah, that's pretty important actually.
That's a good point. And I think also what ends up happening is that Trick wasted a minute of his time.
Yeah.
And Xmithy got ahead. He got the level 5, so he had more time to do whatever he wants on the map. Whereas Trick had to, right after that, because he wasted a minute, he had to just stick to farming instead of being in Elise and ganking more early. Mm-hmm. So I really wish he didn't do that, and he kind of path where maybe if he wants to gank top again, he should have just like went bottom and then pathed from bottom side towards top and then ganked the Poppy again. I think that was just really bad from Trick. It's not something we really see from him. He doesn't really like float around to gank. We kind of see him power farm and then gank towards the end of a path, which is what good junglers do. And what Trick did was not good.
Yeah,
I think one of the things we also really need to talk about when we talk about this game is the draft. So I think coming into it, it was really obvious what each team had like a clear plan going in. You know, G2 picked this very poke kind of catch heavy comp, but COG's comp was kind of like more team fighting. But the big thing for me was the bottom lane. So CLG first rotation, Caitlyn Nami on red side, and that to me speaks to a pretty good level of research, because one of the things that I don't know if I spoke about it in the episode that we cut or in the episode that we aired, but one of the things I spoke about with regards to my research for G2 is that they really struggled to kind of do anything in games, even domestically, when they had no pressure from bottom lane. And I think CLG noticed that, and picking the Caitlyn and the Nami is such a gauntlet to throw down. You're like, okay, what else can you do? And I think really what we saw was that Perks is kind of a great player in isolation, but once you put him in a place where he kind of needs to coordinate with his team to build advantages, and again, what we saw from his spaces, I don't think G2 solo lanes are, at least based on what we've seen, I don't think we've seen any noticeable improvement from this team at all from G2. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Every time I see Perks, I just think about where is Spring Split Perks, you know, because he was quite better in lane, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he was really good.
I mean, that's
the
what
finals.
we were talking about, is that he played well in lane, but that's the thing we talked about last time, is that who he in this meta with the current champions that are floating around, like the Syndra, like the Aurelion Sol, like the Ryze, he's not going to be punished like he used to be punished in previous metas where the Azir and the Victor were meta.
Yeah.
And talking about perks. Do we have the bottom dive?
Yeah, we do.
Let's bring up the bottom dive. That's super important.
Yeah. Do you know if that streamable shows like after the dive, the following fight, like right after that dive, where G2 fights with a man down?
Yeah. It has the whole thing.
So let's show all of it. So the great thing that CLG did was, like we were talking about, focusing around bot, but also playing around Olaf's ult and ghost. And we kept seeing this game, whenever Olaf had his ult and his ghost, they would just go for a play. And I was really impressed with that. And I don't think G2 maybe didn't play versus enough Olafs in Europe or in their boot camp, but
it's
I don't
really
think they
NA
expected
pick, I
this
think.
at all.
Like, I mean, you've got
we saw a bit of
players in
it.
NA.
I think the only jungler that played it in EU was Jankos. So maybe not enough practice playing against it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a definite factor. Give me just a sec because I had a bit of problem here with streamable. Yeah, now it should be fine. Sorry about that, guys, because this part of the video is setting up the video is probably the hardest because I'm not used to it.
We're attempting to do something pretty different here. So
yeah, I
try
had
and
to
just kind of bear with us as we work out the production kinks in this, but things will hopefully get better.
Yeah, by tomorrow they will be better. This time it was just the first time I was doing something like this, so you'll have like some black bars and some videos that are not correct. Oh, whoops. So streamable. Okay. So this is the dive. I'm gonna play it now.
Yep. So I think what's really important is if we look at the mini map, we can see that the what actually is super important is that G2 even has okay,
it's playing. So Perks,
Okay,
yeah. So Perks actually has like the roam advantage on Huhi, but
I think Huhi ghosts.
But look at his pathing though. Why is he pathing through river?
Yeah,
it's
bad. And then he flashes forward, which doesn't accomplish much. I mean, he gets rid of Nami ult, and then they just get
So if the first thing is that so the first thing to note here is Perks' pathing to get to bot lane, like going through river when their bot lane is pushed up, he's just gonna get collapsed on. That's obvious to note. The other thing is that G2 kept fighting when their like teammates were dying. Like I don't understand.
There was a lot of that.
This is something. This was a symptom of G2 all split, and even though it's not the same team from Spring and MSI, but this is also a problem they had in the previous split, which is they keep fighting in disadvantaged situations.
Yeah, I think what's really important as well about that dive,
and G2, continue.
Sorry, what's really important about that dive is it actually relates a little bit to, so I think Trick actually did like something pretty good in the early part of the game where he first blooded Darshan by diving him into the tower at level 4. But then what happened is expect blue TP to come back to lane and try and snowball that lead really hard. But then what happens is that once this bottom lane dive comes up, the Expect doesn't have TP anymore. So there's like a 10-second window where Darshan has TP and Expect doesn't, and they execute really hard. I think it's really important that they pulled off this play without the mid laners, even though Perks had the roaming advantage. The fact that they had the TP advantage meant more. And I think it's really impressive from CLG to showcase that, they understand when to pull the trigger, even when there's like a really narrow time window. So I think
it was a really good game from CLG. Xmithy just outplayed Trick. I'm wondering when Xmithy is just gonna stand up, take off his mask, and show it's been rain over all this time.
I just wanted to mention that one thing we saw this first day was I was not expecting Vladimir, and a lot of people were not expecting it, except for like a pick scenario. And we've seen it 2 times into Syndra, and I think the plan is pretty decent actually. Like what you do with that lane is you just nullify it to the point where Syndra can't really force anything. You have Ghost, you have Flash, you have Pool, and your first item is Spirit Visage. So you just nullify the whole thing. So I think it's a pretty interesting matchup. We saw it 2 times. We saw it this game, and we saw INTZ DG. And I was not expecting Vladimir, so it's interesting that he's coming back at least specifically for that matchup, because he just holds it, And even though Huhi was behind like on the roam, he just ghosts. He's like 2 seconds behind, and suddenly he's flanking Perks. So. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to Rox ANX. We don't want to spend too much time on this because I think everyone saw pretty much what we expected to see, at least after the
first.
There's
not much to break down except for the one thing early on.
I do want to talk about Peanut's invade. So okay,
do I show it? Do I show it?
Yeah. I mean, Peanut. I mean, come on, man. Like, what are you doing?
I think
so. He invades. So I actually want to talk a little bit about the ANX jungler. I'm sorry, I don't 100% know what his name is off by heart. But
Staios.
Oh yeah, PvP Staios or something.
Yeah.
And what he did is he started an interesting path where he cleared his red and then went down towards the blue and then came back. And And by that point, Peanut had invaded, but Peanut is invading with like no pressure on his lanes. So what ends up happening is,
and he was half health, I think, right?
yeah, and it was like half health.
No, he was
And
pretty close to full actually.
oh, okay,
I'm
yeah,
showing
but
it right
either
now.
way, like, can we show the minimap?
Yeah, let me.
Can we
It's
get the
just
minimap?
Streamable is trolling me to the point where I have like sometimes it opens a video on one side and the other times on another. So that's why you're seeing it zoomed in right now. Just like so, I have to put 2 scenes, one for streamable one for streamable 2. Whatever.
Yeah.
These production
bear
kinks
with
will
bear
all be,
with us, guys.
Yeah, these production kinks are pretty much for the first debrief episode, and then we'll be good. So it should be. Yeah, now it's like wrong place.
Sorry,
I
guys.
think the
we can just talk about it. I mean,
yeah, like the one thing to note is that Peanut had, like, I'm worried about Peanut because he wasn't this bad during the regular split, but it showed in the playoffs. I don't know what happened, but I feel like maybe when the stakes are high, he underperforms or he just makes bad decisions, and we saw that when he played versus Score. And today, I don't know if he was just I don't know if it's like the same symptom or he was just underestimating Steos.
Yeah, so shall I roll
just got punished that.
Yeah, you can roll it. So basically, the way I feel about this is that like the Vlad's always going to get to this fight before the mid lane, and that's like the most important thing when you have an invade on Raptors. Like the top lane matters kind of, but not to the point, not to the level that mid lane matters here. And I think it's super important that we highlight that like Peanut. This for me speaks to a larger issue where we questioned even in the first episode whether Peanut was going to show up internationally at all because he had, I mean. There were some mechanical outplays and stuff, which you would expect from, the best team in the world, what we perceive to be the best team in the world. But I think in terms of a macro play, this is really poor from Rocks. And we saw a lot of that. The entire early game was, in my opinion, characterized pretty much by Rocks Tigers really, really disrespecting ANX. And I think, actually, I wanted to say, like, credit to ANX because even when, like, Rocks does these, like, crazy moves, a lot of teams, particularly in previous layers, like especially a wildcard team, would just roll over and die. But I think what's really important is that ANX played the game the right way, and even though they don't have like necessarily the best players at every position, I think it's super important that we highlight how well ANX played punishing Rocks. I think the overwhelming talent from Rocks kind of was the big thing from this game, but I wasn't impressed with Rocks at all.
I just wanted to mention that in terms of jungle pathing, that was kind of weird because, like, basically what Steos did was he started red buff, which is a bit weird. But I think his idea is he wants to quickly get his buffs and not get counter.
He wants to protect his buff. That's the standard. That's a standard path for trying to protect your buffs.
Yeah, it's just a shame because, like, when you start red, you kind of waste the duration of red. But I get the idea. So he does red, wolves, blue. And then I don't know if he does
goes
Grom,
back for his
but
Raptors.
then he goes
No, he doesn't do Grom. He goes back for his Raptors.
Yeah.
But
so right here, I think that Peanut, I don't know if he wards red, but if he sees Raptors are up, he has to think that the guy is either doing Gromp or he's coming back, right? And I think that Peanut, if he wanted to do a play there, he could have just sat in the brush and got a few chip damage on the Graves and then backed off. And that would have been a good play because it limits the Graves, It limits the Graves, and then he gets a pressure advantage in the map. But what he did was so greedy. He just like wards. He wards, and then he starts taking the Raptors, and he has no idea where Graves is.
Yeah.
I think we can just say that we can say for now he was just trolling and underestimating his opponent. Yeah. And hopefully it's not a symptom that's gonna reoccur throughout the tournament.
Yeah,
sure.
I agree.
Right. Let's talk about HGK and AHQ. So I actually want to talk a little bit about this first because I've got quite a rant to talk about HGK. So in the first episode, and quite extensively on Twitter, I've been talking about how I don't think that HGK, at least based on what we've seen, has made any improvement since the playoffs. I don't think they've. I mean, one of the things that I talked about when we did our predictions is that I think that HGK definitely can take the game versus AHQ, but it's almost entirely on Yakos to step up. He's got to go off in the early game, and he's got to snowball his lanes. And what we saw was none of that at all. The initial invade was Yakos goes behind the tower at like level 3 and tries to dive like 2 full HP with like barely half a wave, which doesn't really do anything. Well, meanwhile, like Mounted goes top and gets first blood for Ziv. And I think actually in credit to Adwamni, he was the best performing player on this team. But I think we really didn't see anything. Yeah, so fair enough. That point I was wrong, but I do think that like in terms of how the team operates, I characterized HDK pretty well. I think they did not show up at all. We saw some really good early game moves. I think the way they pressured the mid and the bottom lane especially was really good, and they started getting out of towers. But once the out of towers had gone down, I think they have no idea what to do because they suddenly let Ann and Elvis farm, and then Ann on Jinx just it just goes to side lanes, takes the towers, goes to another side lane, takes the towers, and there was no snowballing of that early pressure. And what we saw was, they eventually go into this 20-minute Baron dance. I mean, I want to say I don't think either team was particularly good in this game, but I think I was really disappointed in H2K and their just distinct lack of improvement based on what we saw since playoffs.
I mean, so a couple of things there is that, one, this is a symptom of H2K's problem this whole year.
Yeah.
And the second is that I don't know why people have this assumption that a boot camp will magically fix a team's problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think that only in really rare cases do we see teams actually improve significantly, or at least like fix problems from boot camp.
Yeah.
Because like when you think of what a boot camp is, it's just you're basically changing the environment so that you can increase the intensity of your practice.
Yeah.
And it's about but in the end, it's about what you put into your practice and how you treat practice. And most teams, I feel like they don't do anything special to work on their problems and to like basically increase the intensity and increase the efficiency of practice in their boot camps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to mention just it's minor, but like the first blood on Ziv I think it's a mistake from Jankos in the sense that
he should have been top.
He knows that level 1, he and Odoamne were forced to burn flash, right? So if he's not top to stop the 2v1, he's just putting his top lane in a really rough spot. So that didn't matter much. I think you guys wanted to show. You guys wanted to see the.
Yeah. So before we show this clip,
right?
let's talk a little bit about what I said in episode 1. So one of the big things that I talked about is how to identify teams with poor shot calling. So let's remember what I pointed out. So there's 2 really big factors that I look for to see if a team has poor shot calling. Number 1 is, do they understand how to bait Baron properly, and can they ever execute on a Baron bait? Mm-hmm. The second one is, just if you see junglers just randomly sitting in bushes, or like even just like teams randomly sitting in bushes hoping for the enemy to just face check, basically what you're hoping for is for an enemy to make an unforced error with no provocation from your side at all. That's literally like that is literally like the big like red flag for me is, does this team have poor shot calling? We saw both of these from H2K. We saw Ryu get caught off in a brush that they didn't know was warded. We saw Jankos get caught in a brush that they didn't know was warded. It's poor warding. It's like poor warding control. We want to talk a bit about the way H2K Baron baits as well, and the way AHQ Baron baits, because the difference is like night and day. So do we have the clip?
Yeah. So I just wanted to show before that. I just wanted to show the H2K getting caught over and over again, because it's just
So let's show the brush camps.
And now streamable isn't working. Nice.
Basically, the thing to identify, and I think for everyone watching, this is something you should look for, is whenever you see a jungler, and we saw this from Trick as well. When he was ganking for top lane, he just walks into the brush and he's hoping for the enemy to just check the brush or go all in for no reason. Like there is good players don't play that way. So expect him to make these like unforced errors it just doesn't make any sense. And
it doesn't work at this stage.
It just doesn't work at this level. Like, these players are too good. They're not going to just randomly go all in and try and force a trade. It just doesn't work like that. So
and the thing you were talking about Baron play, like while X2K's was bad, I thought AHQ's Baron baits and the way they played around Baron was pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think it was really good. Yeah, I think it was some of the better we've seen in this tournament.
Like their vision was superb. The way they handled the Baron baits, I think. H2K, they like the way if a team is trying to bait Baron, what you need to do is basically you have champions that have skill shots, and what you need to do is use those skill shots to check if people are in the brush. And we saw H2K not do that. While they had like a Braum Q, they had like Gnar Q, they also had the the Caitlyn Q and the Caitlyn traps, and they didn't use any of them to check if HQ was sitting on a brush.
When you have Caitlyn, like the entire archetype of Caitlyn as a champion is zone control. It's about taking over an area and being like, you cannot like come into this area. and I just don't see why. Like, it blows my mind that they couldn't just set up a Baron, because let's remember as well, AHQ Mountain was on Olaf. He can't flash the wall to get it to Baron if you start the Baron. Like, if you set up the traps, he can run through the traps, sure, but like if you just like poke them down, he'll die.
Oh,
like
the other thing to
like
mention,
if you have a lead and set up a Baron, there's like, given AHQ's comp, I mean, they have like Malzahar, he's not gonna flash over. I mean, they have the only thing they really need to be careful of is like the Bard and the Rumble, because they've got some like good AoE that can maybe like fuck them up a bit, but that Baron baby should be so free when you have Caitlyn and when you have like Cassiopeia, who wants people to run into them. That's how they want to play.
Another thing I noticed that someone commented on Twitter is like H2K were legit didn't know how to play against Olaf ult, to the point where Olaf ults and they just ignore him. And when Olaf ults, he's so much easier to kill, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna play these pickoffs, so forget just here. And then I think the worst one is the Ryu one, where he's just standing mid for no reason, 22 minutes. So these are two pickoffs in 2 minutes, where they legit just give AHQ 2 kills, and it's much more than
the thing is, it's not just about the pickoffs, but what AHQ does after the pickoffs. They quickly translate it into an objective, and that's what I like to see from a team. That's how I know they have some semblance of good macro. Is that how they translate kills into an objective, whether that be a tower, vision, dragon, etc.
Yeah.
And then we also saw like how they played around Baron. I was really impressed, and we talked about this in episode 1, that I think that AHQ, while their early game is a bit suspect, the way they play in the mid game is really, really good.
Yeah, well, the question for this was that we thought that HDK and AHQ were going to be the favorites to come out for second place, and it pretty much came down to, do you have faith in HDK's early game or not? And I didn't, and I think we saw that.
And I did.
We saw evidence of that. Yeah, it's just I saw an AHQ like really good team fighting, and like a strong understanding of what their strengths and weaknesses were and how to play around them. They remind me a lot of CLG. They know they have the best players, but they operate around their strengths really well, I think. So
you wanted the first Baron bait at 29 minutes. Yeah, I found it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's showcase this Baron bait. Just look at how AHQ control the vision and control the area, and then if you guys are really interested in this, go back and watch the game and look at like the 20 minutes between between 20 minutes and like 40 minutes, the way H2K like get picks in like mid lane, and then they kind of set up a Baron, and sometimes they'll get like catches and stuff, but they never translate into anything. All they do over and over again is
they reset, basically.
Yeah, they just reset, and they don't push it. They don't force AHQ to do something when AHQ's at a disadvantage. They're hoping for AHQ to just randomly throw, and teams at the world stage are just too good for that.
Yeah, so I'm just.
Yeah, I think the. Yeah, so I think.
Do we have the?
When you watch.
I'm just getting trolled.
Yeah.
Again.
The thing you guys should do is, when you go back and watch that game and you watch how AHQ plays around that Baron, is how once they bait the Baron, sometimes they'll start, sometimes they won't. It just depends on which sums they blow and who they get picks off of. So the first time we see them pick off the Braum, he doesn't necessarily die, but they get his flash, and that's like one summoner. So what they do is they reset and then make sure they have Baron vision set up again. The second time they pick off the Elise, right? Yeah, the second time they pick off the Elise, and then because they have the HQ has no jungler, you can perfectly start the Baron with the Malzahar, with the Jinx, and just finish up really quickly with no fear of a smite, a 50-50 smite. And so, as a good team, if the enemy jungler is down and you're relatively healthy, you should start that Baron, because your jungler should be able to secure it.
And even if you don't finish it, you can always use it to turn.
I think. And then later on, what they did was, first they blew Odoamne's TP, and then they chunked him down in the mid lane. And once that happened, he recalled, and because they know that he doesn't have his TP is on cooldown, they can start the Baron, and then they secured it again. And like that's just like brilliant shot calling, brilliant decision making.
I don't know if I call it brilliant, but I'd say like good. Like it's good.
Okay, yeah.
But I wouldn't say it's brilliant. But I think that's fair. It's definitely like leagues ahead of what HTK was doing.
Because like I don't see non-Korean teams do it that often.
Yeah, that's
why I guess I'm saying it's brilliant, because when I look at these non-Korean teams, not a lot of them know how to play around Baron and play around these epic monsters and around objectives.
Yeah,
okay, so I think we have the clip up now.
I finally have the clip.
Okay.
I think we talked about the clip enough. We don't really need to show it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna show it. But they just pink ward here. The pink ward is actually out of the brush for some reason, but they know this. They know this isn't worded, right? And they pink ward there, and they're just waiting. And even though they don't manage to kill Vander, they just put him low enough where they can start a Baron bait. And what this leads to is even if they don't get the Baron, they can always use it to turn and blow more summoners, and that's the idea.
The way you bait Baron is the idea is that you either get the Baron or you get the fight that you want, because they have to run into you. And with HDK's comp, they want ASU to run into them, and they just couldn't find a way to force it to happen. And that for me is not good enough. Anyway, so let's move on to INTZ EDG. So as much as I'm sure people want us to really break down like exactly why and how like INTZ won this game, I think we don't really want to spend too much time on it, because I think that, I mean, you guys could talk about it a little bit more, but at least for me, this was more of an issue of EDG's really poor drafting and I think a really poor understanding of how the meta is right now, and also like how to mitigate a disadvantage into not just snowballing into a loss.
Yeah. I think the thing with EDG is I'm so glad they got punished for their draft, because as we all as like you guys should know, is that they've been undefeated this whole summer split, both in the regular split and in playoffs. And whenever I looked at their drafts, they always seem to have they always seem to not know which like picks should be in the meta, or like how to craft a comp that's perfectly like at least well balanced. And one thing they used to do is they used to draft a lot of Maokai and Echo when they were out of the meta, and I was really surprised by that. And I thought that if they did that on the international stage, if they played champions that were not really in the meta, that they were gonna be punished for it. And here we saw like the Aurelia pick. Sure, it's a good pick in Tanar, and it can work. But two things.
It's so risky.
You need to keep the lane advantage.
Yeah, and two things they need to consider. One is that their top laner is Mouse, who is not, like, if we're going to be frank, he's not very good. And they never really put him on a carry champion except for Gangplank. And what we talked about Gangplank already is that you don't really need to focus the Gangplank. He's going to naturally scale with all the because that's the kind of champion he is. He doesn't need to snowball. And that's the key word here, is that Graves can't really help the Aurelia snowball in the early game.
No.
And this year I've been so dumbfounded by how teams draft Graves. Graves does not have any CC. Graves is like a carry marksman in the jungle. So why are you drafting no hard CC around this champion? It makes no sense.
You need to draft him with 7.
Yeah. I don't understand why teams have like all split all year have been drafting Graves either with like low CC and like without a tank top. I really think if you have Graves, you need a tank CC champion. Maokai's not really in the meta, but like an example is Maokai or Shen. Shen would be Shen, Poppy are good champions. You don't draft it with the earlier.
I wanted to mention a big part of this game for me is Revolta's pathing. I think he pathed. If you watch the game, I was really paying attention to it. I was watching the jungle stream, and the way he paths, like his pathing was always done in a way where he avoided Clearlove, right? Clearlove went to check his Wraiths. They were gone. And he always managed, obviously, like, Clearlove read the early game pretty well, to the point where, like, when Revolta went top to try to get Yang ahead, Clearlove was there, and he has to back off. But the way Revolta farmed his camps, he farmed them in a way, like, his pathing was done in a way where he always could avoid Graves' invades, which is really important. and shows it is a mark of a good jungler. And I've always talked about Revolta being a smart jungler in terms of pathing. Is he completely avoided that matchup? And if you're not aware of the matchup, like Lee Sin gets dumpstered by Graves. If they ever get like in a 1v1, there's no way Lee Sin wins that, unless he has like really good setup where he's ahead in items. But equal farm and equal levels, I don't think he takes it. And then the name of the game, which what I wanted to show, is the basically what happened the whole game was, and this is trolling me again, was with the snowballing of Yang, right? The name of the game was basically how Yang and Revolta worked together to get Yang ahead, right? And this was like a series of, I think it was 3 dives total, and it got Yang so massively ahead in terms of CS, in terms of levels, everything. So, okay, why is this doing this? Yeah, Streamable is just trolling me, guys. I'm sorry. But for
it's okay. We have better prediction than the World's broadcast as we saw the Aurelian Soul bug. So Riot Games production levels.
Yeah, for next time I'll have
the
all the
War
videos
Room
offline.
Esports.
All the videos offline, so this doesn't happen. But yeah, this was the first day, and I woke up not long ago. So I'm just gonna play the clips. They're pretty simple. It's just Revolta going top over and over again.
Yeah, it's just really clean dive mechanics. And actually, there's something I want to highlight for people who want to watch, like how good teams dive. Is good teams, so bad teams dive when not everyone is there to make the play, but good teams dive when everyone is there to execute on the play, and nobody goes in before that happens. So you see, like the way they set up the CC is as soon as like both players are in position to execute. That's when they execute.
And the other important part is how they layer their CC. You don't see stuns being layered really upon each other. It's like perfect. As the Gnar stun ends, comes in the Lee Sin knockup. And this is the play, the really impressive play on Mako and Deft. Like Revolta knows he can't hit the Q on Deft because he has Arcane Shift, so he just goes on Mako. And then he uses that to insec Deft. So just really impressive Lee Sin play all around. And it's I
just
think,
really impressive synergy. I think.
Yeah. I think
really important.
Revolta for me is the MVP of this game simply because how he played the whole game. You know, he got
Sure. So I want to say I just want to say like 2 things before we move on. I think this game is really a credit to INTZ's preparation going in. They identified a strength and they identified like how to execute on it. So their game plan was really good. Their preparation was really good, and I think we should definitely credit them for that. But also I think the wildcard teams in general really deserve a shout out for their level of performance based on the level of expectations that we had. So I was pretty public about my disdain for the level of wildcard play in the wildcard region, the wildcard qualifiers. I was quite open about how I really didn't think they were going to do much at all. And honestly, like I have to admit, I was wrong. I think the levels of play for both the wildcard teams really showcased their level of understanding beyond what I expected. Annex's jungle pathing was really good to punish Peanut, and I think that the way they punished Rox's super over aggression was very impressive. And INTZ, you know, they showcased that they understand how to capitalize on an advantage and how to snowball that. And I think while definitely EDG underperformed, I think it's only to INTZ's credit that they played super well. So I think that while this wasn't necessarily like a super amazing, like clean, like career level game, I don't think we should expect any of the wildcard teams to be making like a deep run at Worlds. But I think definitely this is a really good demonstration of how the wildcard teams at least are improving beyond the rate which I think even I expected. And I think credit to the wildcard teams and good job to those guys. I think really impressive display.
I just wanted to say that if there's any year that a wildcard team could do well, I think it's this year with the INTZ. And I talked about this in the first episode where it got cut, but I said that I saw them get like 1-2 wins, and it wouldn't be a surprise. And seeing how H2K is playing and how even AHQ, even though they won their game, right, they did see things correctly. But
this is the question.
I think,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's too early to talk about it, I think. But I do think INTZ have a legit shot of getting out of the group.
Yeah, same. I agree. I think based on the performances that we saw yesterday, INTZ showcased the best performance of any team in this group so far.
Which was pretty surprising. So shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's move on to Samsung Galaxy and Splice. So I want to open with the draft again. So why are we giving Samsung Victor and Nami? Could somebody explain this to me? Like, why is this a thing? And also, why are they picking Kled? Because I mean, Kled looks awful.
I mean, okay, so first the Victor. I think that Splice did not expect Victor to be a problem in this meta. Maybe they didn't think it would be like a high priority.
Yeah.
And while they probably like, it's not a secret that Crown has like a really amazing Victor.
Yeah.
But I think they just thought that.
I mean, it was banned. It was banned after he went like what 12-0 against KT. I think. I think he went like 12-0, and then they just banned it for the rest of the games. And yeah, you should know this guy's Victor is good.
Yeah, but I just think that they didn't think it was really good in this meta, so it wouldn't be a problem if it got played. As for Nami, I don't know. They probably just thought that targeting Ambition's jungle pool and the Syndra was much more important.
Yeah.
As for the Kled, this is again another like what I mentioned from the last game is that why are you drafting a carry sort of like a bruiser top with Graves? It makes no sense. Like Kled is a snowball champion. He has to build 2 damage items in the Titanic Hydra and Black Cleaver before he can build tank.
Yeah.
He needs help in the early game, and especially into the Rumble. So why Rumble can give Kled problems is that Rumble has the Flame Splitter to get Kled out of the Scarl form and get him unmounted. Yeah. And Kled in his unmounted form is super vulnerable to dives. And then when you have Rumble and Rek'Sai versus Kled, I would hate to be that Kled.
Yeah.
I do think Kled is a good champion. It just should not be picked with the Graves, and I don't think it should be picked into Rumble Rek'Sai. That's just like
and we saw that the Kled was behind, and he was still out. He was still able to like in his all-ins. The damage is still really impressive with violent tendencies. You know, like if he gets in, he can really do some damage. But I think I agree. I think first his jungler needs to give him attention, and that jungler cannot be Graves. It needs to be a jungler that can bring CC, because he doesn't really have the CC by himself to set up for ganks. So he needs like an Elise. He needs like something that can really set him up, right? And yeah, just Trashy overall. Like I can show the first clip, but I don't think it's that important. Where Graves is Kled is getting 2v1'd in top, like they're throwing Prey Seekers at him.
Yeah.
And
happened here.
Yeah, and Trashy's like, it's just so confusing where Trashy's just like doing Raptors, and he's seeing that Wonder is top, and it has to be communicated, and he's not going top, and then he goes top, and legit, if he goes top earlier and stops that dive or interrupts the dive, it's a 1-for-1 for sure, you know.
Or even they could even get both the kills. Like if they're gonna commit into the tower,
it's totally possible. I don't know what's happening there to the point where, like the time that Samsung stayed up top trying to remove Kled from his mount was like over 30 seconds. And Trashy was already topside jungle. So, I don't know. Like, that's such a... It seemed like one of those games where, like, you're playing solo queue and your jungler just ignores you. And he could have just come.
Yeah.
It just looked so bad from Trashy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that Splice, one of the symptoms of problems they have this whole summer is that they have really poor early game.
Yeah.
And it just I think they were down 4K at 15 minutes.
Yeah,
which is terrible.
They actually showed good team fighting, even though they were.
With that said, their fights were still extremely close in some scenarios, and I think that was mainly because of the Tom Kench, and because I think Samsung were trolling a bit.
Yeah.
Like we saw Ruler just arcane shipped into like 2 champions.
Oh my god.
And just getting caught out left and right. So
can we just highlight?
Fighting,
Yeah, could we just highlight like Mickey's Tom Kench? Like I mean, you said like Tom Kench like the champion, but I think also like we need to highlight really how Mickey himself like played. Like the way he used his ultimate was super good. Like particularly when they were looking to dive.
Yeah.
When Senkox was in top lane and he was 1v1 in the Rumble, and then Samsung Galaxy collapsed it, and Mickey comes in with the Graves and buys enough time for them to turn the fight around. I think that was super good. It was such a ballsy call, but I think like all the times they went like all in with Kled and then like Mickey would just like save the Kled right at the last minute, or somebody would get picked and Mickey would save them right at the last minute. I think Mickey for me was super good. Like Mickey and Senkooks really stepped up. I know Mickey was like on a bit of a hype, but like going in, but I think definitely he stepped even beyond that. I think Wonder was kind of like disappointing. I think some of his clear were a bit like meh.
Yeah.
Trashy looked awful, and I think Kobe was kind of like whatever. But it definitely Mickey and Senkooks especially really stepped it up.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, any last words on this game before we move on?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do we think Splice gets any wins in this group?
Based on the way RNG's playing, no. If RNG plays the same way they play against TSM, I think they'll win the group.
Yeah, but what about TSM?
I think we should talk about the TSM RNG game before we make that prediction.
Okay,
I don't know. It's one game. I don't want to go too hard into predictions based on one game for each of the teams. I think we need to see TSM step it up a bit, but I think Splice. No, I still think they come out last.
Yeah, no, for sure. And my question was more like, do they get a game? Do they?
Yeah,
spoiler. I think they have the potential in them to do it.
Yeah, I think so. So should we move on to TSM RNG?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let NASA take this one and talk a little bit about Jungle Invades, because he was going on about this quite a lot in the last episode. So talk us through what happened in the early game for this game.
So first, I said that the theme for this world is going to be jungle pressure, and that's not necessarily how the jungler pressures his lanes, but how the jungler is basically facilitated to pressure the enemy jungler in the enemy's jungle, basically. And we saw that perfectly in this game with Svenskeren. And this has been a trademark of how TSM plays and how TSM gets their leads this whole summer, basically. You can basically just show the clip whenever, and I'll just continue talking.
Yeah.
But basically, what TSM does is they always gets at least 2 pushing lanes, and those 2 pushing lanes facilitate Svenskeren to invade the enemy jungle and to basically steal camps, get down vision. Yeah. And what happens is that you deny. Yeah, I'll just keep talking. And what happens is basically you deny the enemy jungler experience and gold. And RNG can't respond to it because they have their waves pushed in, and their solo laners need to be able to collect that farm. And because they're pushed in, Bjergsen and Hanser are able to just leave lane with no cost and back up their own jungler. And they did this 3 or 4 times this game, collecting NLXG's buffs.
Yeah.
I do want to note though that I think RNG's draft was super risky, and it kind of allowed TSM to really abuse them in their jungle. So they picked their solo lanes early, and they got counterpicked. They picked their solo lanes in their first rotation on red side, and so TSM was just able to counterpick the lanes to be able to get pushing lanes. On top of that, RNG picked Hecarim in the jungle, which is super farm aligned early, doesn't really have any mobility or pressure to be able to pressurize the enemy jungler. Yeah. So TSM and Svenskeren just had a field day taking control of RNG's jungle. It was beautiful to watch, but I also think the draft had a part to do with it.
Yeah, when we talk about the draft, I think it's really important that we also talk about the bottom lane, because what we all saw was Mata going off and putting on a showcase of like why he is the best support player of all time. But I think what's really important as well is you have to talk about how poor the TSM bot lane played. I don't think even they think they play very well, but like Bifrost was getting caught out here and there, and like when you pick Nami and Jin, like that's such a bully lane, especially against a melee support like Alistar. Because he can't use any of his abilities to help wave clear, because then he loses literally all the pressure he has in the lane. But what we saw was Mata constantly roaming around the map. He first blooded Svenskeren in his Raptors with MLXG, and when you have like this pushing lane, like the enemy support shouldn't be able to roam. That's just not how it should work. Like your goal when you pick this super aggressive bottom lane is to keep the enemy AD and support at their tower so they can't roam, because that's the way you beat the melee matchup. You know, that's the only advantage the range support has going into the in the game at all is the fact that they have this huge pushing advantage in lane, a huge trading advantage. But what we saw was a complete lack of punish on Mata every time he left the lane. Like, there's no reason why like Uzi should have been equal in farm. There's no reason why Mata should have been inside like Svenska and jungle. And I think they really dropped the ball in the bottom lane. I think Hodzer played pretty well. He was accumulating a CS lead. He had pressure in his lane. Bjergsen played pretty well. He was pushing the lane. He got Svenska and some invades. But I was really disappointed in the way that TSM played. And I think.
I mean, they played fine in the early game. The problem
the early game was fine, except for bot lane pressure, I think, because Mata shouldn't be where he was getting the first blood on Sven. Like, no way that should happen ever without bot lane. Because if you're picking Nami, you just need to pressure bot, or else why are you picking Nami in the first place? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And Doublelift was really greedy with his flash, and I know some people will say Mata's just a god in Alistar, and while that's true, that's not what you expect from what is supposed to be a international world-class ADC in Doublelift who has been playing this game for years.
Yeah.
He should not be holding on to his flash, and even some cases he was autoing Alistar instead of flashing.
Yeah. So I'm gonna roll
from the headbutt pulverize. Yeah, you can do it. Where are you gonna roll?
Yeah, the first clip, which is the. Wait, what? Why did this do this? I swear I'm getting trolled super hard by this. Whatever.
And so, and this wasn't just like this one time. Doublelift, I think on 4 or 5 occasions, refused to flash from the headbutt pulverize, and that was just pretty abysmal. And this is why. I've talked about on my Twitter, and when people ask me who do you prefer, Sven or Doublelift, and for me it's always Sven, because he does not make these errors, at least very rarely. Whereas for Doublelift, while he had a really great summer split, this has been a tendency of his positioning and his micro management in team fights isn't as up to par as some of these world-class Korean ADCs and Sven.
Yeah. So this is the first invade, and this shouldn't be happening. It's a pretty good play by RNG to get the vision and then have Mata invade, but this shouldn't happen. Like Mata was allowed to leave the lane. He left through his tower, so I think he left through Dry Brush. And he was.
Can I quickly ask something? Is the TSM bottom lane freezing here to zone Uzi? That's so greedy.
Yeah, they are.
I think they are. I think they freeze.
I think
they freeze the bottom lane.
I think they froze, and right now what's happening
I didn't notice that.
Is the freeze just ended, and the wave is like stacking up to go onto Uzi. But that's like a solid 30-40 seconds that, since you're zoned out, your support can just leave the lane and go elsewhere. Because your AD carry isn't going to get the farm either way if you're getting freezed on.
Yeah, that's super greedy. I think,
Can we show the RNG teleport play?
Yeah, give me a sec.
When they set up a dragon? Yeah, I think that was a really good demonstration of Mata's vision control. I think it's really impressive.
And Looper's teleports, just a really good...
I mean, you mean Mata's teleports?
Yeah, the meme.
I love what Monte Cristo, I think it was Monty that said he just envisions Mata like piloting Looper as if he was like a mecha. Like a Gundam mecha. That was hilarious.
So I'm gonna roll the clip if I can.
Yeah. So one thing to point here is that I don't think TSM could have done anything, because if you look at where the ward is, super smart ward.
Such a good place.
Yeah.
Such a sneaky ward. It's not in the tribush, and it's just behind the dragon pit. And why would you expect a ward to be there? Players don't usually ward there. They usually ward brushes, or the spaces on camps basically.
Yeah.
And so that ward was perfect, and I don't think TSM could have done anything to prepare for that, because maybe they thought they already swept the vision properly.
Yeah, and that ward you can see on the minimap right now. There's a pink ward by TSM on the entrance brush to red buff, and that ward is just below, but it's way out of vision of the pink ward. So it's a really good ward. And then you have to consider that it's Rumble. So Rumble can ult from the other side of Dragon Pit, and he doesn't even need to be in your screen. He's just ulting from a screen away. So I'm just
Well, what's
gonna
really
So I
important
don't
about
think.
what's really
I,
important about that fight as well is that like this is another example. Like Doublelift gets pulled here with flash up.
yeah.
Like let's not ignore that fact. Like the
yeah,
ward is
that's
great, the
again
TP is
what
great,
I
but
was
like
talking about.
Doublelift gets pulled with flash up. I mean, what are you doing, man? Like he
Yeah.
has like what's Alistair's headbutt range is like 650, I think, and Doublelift's auto attack range is like 575. So he just shouldn't ever be in range to auto attack Alistair when Alistair's pull is up ever. It should just not happen ever.
Yeah, and this
Yeah,
is the
like if
second
this.
play. This is the second play at 31 minutes where Mata. This is like really good reaction play from Mata where he tries to headbutt Bjergsen into RNG's team, but Bjergsen flashes, and this is what you do against an Alistair. So Doublelift, take notes on what your mid laner is doing because this is what you do. You flash the you flash the headbutt. So I'm just gonna roll the clip. He flashes the headbutt, and then Mata flash pulverizes on 3 people, and it's
Yeah.
just such a perfect setup.
Honestly.
Because
Yeah.
let me just finish. I just wanted to say it's just a perfect setup because as the pulverize comes in, the flash pulverize, you see the rumble ult and the miasma, and the miasma grounds you to the point where you can't flash out. So those targets are dead. And you even talked about Nasser in the beginning of the game why Mata didn't have exhaust, and it could be pretty problematic against Kennen. I mean, I guess when you play like this and you kill the whole enemy team before Kennen can even do anything, it's not even relevant.
Yeah, and honestly, watching this play, I feel like Mata planned this. Like he didn't plan to, because he didn't pulverize Bjergsen.
Mm-hmm.
He just headbutted to get into range, and then he flashed. Like
I mean,
he knew.
I think
He knew the Ori flash was up. He had to know. He had to have known that. And if he wanted to flash pulverize the Orianna, he would have pulverized the Orianna.
Yeah, but he wanted to
but
headbutt the Orianna either way. To get out of
Yeah,
position or not.
No.
Like, if he gets to headbutt, it's even better, right? But
Yeah.
I know what you mean. He already had the whole play in his head, I think, which was like headbutt the Orianna into your team and then flash pulverize the rest of them. I think that's the play. So yeah.
Yeah, and so this game just showed us what we were talking about last time, George, which was in the international stage when TSM are playing versus teams that are close to their level.
Yeah.
How are they going to play if the gold is close? And what we saw in the regular split versus when the games they did lose, they play without direction. They play very reactively, and they just don't show the same proactivity that they do when they do have that comfortable gold lead.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have the Kennen, and they went for. I don't think they went for any TP plays on the Kennen.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so
I think what's also really important is that I don't think, at least for me, like some people say they could have predicted it, but I think it's a bit disingenuous. I don't think you could have predicted that Doublelift would play individually this bad. I don't think you can predict that Bifrost would play this bad. We saw no evidence of it. We saw no way, way that TSM had been punished in this way at all this split, which I think is the only relevant, really kind of information you need to take in terms of judging their gameplay. So I think it's really unfair to say people like, oh, we always knew Doublelift would play this bad. It's like, I think that's a bit unfair. I think what we saw was Doublelift play really clean. I mean, he was my pick for the MVP for the summer split. Like one of two. Like, it was between him and Bjergsen, but there was no way that he wasn't like one of the two best players in the league. You know, it was like him and Bjergsen were the two best players in the league in the summer split. I think that's pretty much undisputed. So I think looking at this and looking at the display that Doublelift put on, I think it's unfair to say that we knew this was coming. I think what is fair to say is that we did say that RNG has the individual talent to take the game off TSM, but only if they somehow manage to fix their problems, which, I mean, I don't know what happened, but they did. Like, this is... I mean, Mada's vision control was super good. One of the things I highlighted during the game on my Twitter feed was how they were controlling the vision, but doing a really economical job of it. They weren't going they weren't going too deep. They weren't trying to clear out all the river. They were just making sure that it was inside their jungle, and that's what's super important about denying TP flanks. And you know, lower level teams can take this as a really good example of how to control vision versus teams that rely on TP flanks. Kennen does not do anything outside of TP in and all. That's kind of all he can do. He's not the greatest split pusher. He's okay, but he's not like really good at getting kills 1v1. He like really relies on his Q skill shot, which in theory is difficult to land. And I think it's really difficult to play against this team if they're just clearing out all your deep wards all the time. So I think RNG played super well. But the MVP for me was definitely Matter with his pulverizers, but also the way he controlled vision. I don't think that was covered enough or given as much importance, as in my opinion the way it should be. Definitely the way they controlled vision was so important. For that game.
I guess you can say that RNG played a macro-based methodical style economic approach.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice to see. And honest to God, I'm super excited for RNG now. I am so pumped to see RNG because, honest to God, if Matt is going to play this well and this team's going to play so well around him, this team could go deep. This team could, in theory, take the whole thing if they play like that. It's too early to say, but I definitely that's how I feel.
So sorry to cut you guys, but we're at 1 hour. So do we cut here or do we go to questions?
One last point I want to make is that. In the last episode, we talked about how the problem with RNG was their macro, and if they got that sorted, that team is going to be able to make it to the finals, I think. So if they end up continuing this sort of form, so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
So now we go on to questions.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to ask anybody on the show any questions, put them into the Twitch chat right now. We're going to start taking questions. I'll obviously there's a slight delay, so we'll need to wait a little bit. So
I have a question that a guy asked me on Twitter.
Sure.
Yeah, go on. Let's start with that.
Are teams going to be trending to scaling comps despite early push power, tower gold value early? RNG, Samsung games both went late. I'm not sure if the Samsung game went late. I can't remember, but the RNG game is of note. And also,
do we want to just quickly point out who asked the question? I think it's important that we say who asked the question.
Airbud lol.
Okay, Airbud lol.
Twitter. Yeah, and also the INTZ versus EDG game went to 46 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So that's something to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a relevant thing. I think that if teams, we've seen the teams weren't very clean, many of the teams we saw, they had an advantage and they don't know how to use those advantages to close the game. And then if you're on the other side and you're behind, but the team that's against you doesn't know how to close or doesn't know how to extend their advantage or cement a lead, like the H2K HQ game, I think a pick like Jinx is actually really good. And I think that's the reason why we saw Jinx yesterday twice. And we'll keep seeing her throughout the tournament, is because if you already have, you really want to have a winning side lane, right? But if your top lane is already winning, if you have a winning top lane, I think you can draft Jinx and have that safety, have that insurance that if the game goes to 40 minutes, you have a complete legit hyper carry that will 1v5 the game easily, Because Jinx with peel is if she has good peel, she's ridiculous and she can take over games. And it's true, we've seen some of these games go late, so.
Yeah, maybe. There's a pretty good question here from Agent 01H. I think I apologize if I say your name wrong, but he says, do you think the second seed from Group D could be a first seed from another group? So I think for this, we have to speculate how this group's going to go. So let's go a little bit into more of an experimental style. So let's look at who could win this group. So based on current performance, I think the two favorites to make it out of this group is Samsung and RNG.
Yeah, right.
So who could be the first seed from other groups? So I definitely think if the second seed from Group D plays a first seed from Group C, based on current performance, it's either going to be EDG, H2K, AHQ, or INTZ, because honestly, any of them could make it out based on current performance. Yeah, I 100% think a second seed.
I just think it's hilarious.
Could be a first seed. Could be a first seed from Group C. We've not seen anything from Group B, so I don't want to go too far into speculating on that. But no, I don't think any of them could beat Rox, who I still think are going to win Group A. But I think, I can see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate too much on one game. I want to still think about the EDG we saw in playoffs and a lot of the regular split. I think today was a draft. I mean, yesterday was a drafting and this play hiccup from some of the players. So I think I can see it. I can see RNG. I can see RNG, TSM, and Samsung. If any of those teams end up as the second seed, beating EDG in some scenarios.
Yep.
As for beating Grox or SKT/C9.
Or Flash Wolves. Let's not sleep on the LMS teams.
Yeah,
we've seen enough of that.
too.
We'll see. I don't want to talk about it until I see them.
I think it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I have one more question. The 4 figures. What changes might we see from TSM for today's match against Samsung? So I can take a little bit on this one first. So I think definitely Doublelift and Bifrost have to step it up. I think that Samsung Galaxy doesn't have the same level of team fight mechanics. I think Crown is really good, but I think in terms of like RNG versus Samsung, RNG definitely is the superior team fighting team based on what I saw. And I think that if they can find a way to get inside Samsung's jungle the same way that they got inside MLXG's jungle, I think that RNG doesn't really rely on MLXG in the same way that Samsung relies on Ambition to really set up the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Ambition is far more important to Samsung than MLXG is for RNG. So I think if TSM managed to get to draft like early pushing lanes and managed to find a way to get inside Samsung's jungle, I definitely think that that's going to be good. In terms of what changes they make, I think that honestly they need to respect the enemy's engaged potential more, because they're a good team fighting team, assuming that like kind of everything goes right. And I think that they need to clean up a little bit the way they skirmish. But other than that, I think the way they played against RNG should, in theory, work as long as Samsung play kind of the same way they do. And just don't give them Victor, for fuck's sake.
I think another thing they need to talk about is probably how to draft. I don't think their draft was bad. Maybe they could have changed the support pick. But how do they want to craft the composition when the 3 top junglers, Nidalee, Elise, and Rek'Sai are banned? We saw the first time they went for the Skarner, but then they remade the game and went for the Lee Sin because they probably realized, hey, we probably need an early pressure jungler in this scenario. So are they going to continue going with the Lee Sin? And if so, do they want to craft the composition differently around the Lee Sin? Another thing to note about why they went for Lee Sin was that Lee Sin is pretty good into Kennen when Kennen tries to engage. So I think they saw that they picked Kennen into Lee Sin, and they were like, "Oh shit, we should probably take that away because it'll help us help with our Kennen engages." Even though they didn't end up doing any good Kennen engages.
Yeah. So
I think what's
go
ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should move on because we're piling up the questions. But yeah, go on.
Okay. So I want to just address one more thing about the TSM thing, is that there are now questions about TSM's jungle pool, because what we saw is RNG's draft strategy was to ban out all the junglers and then pick a jungler in the first rotation. But what we saw in the redraft was TSM decided that they wanted to pick Lee Sin. And there's questions about whether or not they picked the Lee Sin to deny the Lee Sin from MLXG because it was an issue into Kennen. But there's also questions to me about whether or not they even wanted Skarner, whether that was a panic pick.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. I mean, this is purely blind speculation, but Skarner for me doesn't really strike me as a Svenskeren type jungler. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I would expect to see teams try the same draft strategy against TSM about trying to pinch Svenskeren's pool, because I think if they don't have a good way to get inside the enemy jungle, I don't think TSM really do much in the early game. And I think the other teams in this group, especially like RNG and Samsung, I think could definitely take it in the mid game. So I think that's going to be the thing.
So this is a good segue, since you were talking about jungle pool.
Mm-hmm.
Remy asked if Lee Sin is kind of meta, or if he's just a pocket pick that we'll see a lot. But I do think he's a pocket pick, but we will see him because I think there's a lot of games that will tend to go towards jungle bans. And if we see the Nidalee, the Elise constantly banned, and then even the Rek'Sai, then we have to go down to the pool too, right? And then we have very different types of junglers. We have Lee Sin, who's a good skirmisher. He can set up ganks, and we see what a good Lee Sin can do. Then we also have Zac, and then we also have like the weird pocket picks like Evelyn, for
Skarner,
example.
Evelyn.
Skarner, yeah. So it becomes, once you get out of that tier 1, of that Nidalee, that Elise, those two champions specifically, and even maybe Rek'Sai, you get into the tier 2 of jungle champs that is basically each of them does a very different thing. So you kind of pick them to tailor them towards your composition, and not as much you pick them because they're super OP, right? Like Elise, like Nidalee. So I do think we'll see a lot of Lee Sin, and we have very good junglers at Worlds, so we'll see a lot of Lee Sin games.
Yeah. I think a couple of points is that one, she mentions Gragas as the part of the meta. Gragas isn't really good right now due to the ult engage nerf, where there's a delay on his cast time, and because of that, you can good players will be able to flash out of that engage, whereas before it was instant and players couldn't really react to it. So that's why we don't see much Gragas anymore, just because his engage is so unreliable. The second point is, so why is Lee Sin meta? So one is what Shaka was saying, was that we're seeing a lot of jungle bans, and once those top tier, S tier jungle picks are out of the picture, what do we pick? So what do we pick? So what we were talking about earlier was the theme of this world is jungle pressure.
Yeah.
So which champions outside of Elise, Nidalee, Rek'Sai offer jungle pressure? And when you look at the pool of champions, you have to think of Lee Sin, because the other junglers we've seen picked, like Skarner, Hecarim, those are the two that come to mind. They need to farm early. They don't really apply any pressure. They have pretty low mobility early. They can't really go into the enemy jungle that safely. Whereas Lee Sin has high mobility. He can invade. He can gank. He can make plays. So yeah, I think that's basically the biggest reason.
Okay, so one last question, I think, before we end. So Tassel93 asks, can H2K and G2 bounce back, or are they, or do they seem doomed? So who wants to take this one?
I mean, for H2K, I think this I see them bouncing back, but at the same time, I feel like if you watch games like the Splice series back in playoffs, you see that this is a problem that stems deep and is a problem that has been present on H2K for a long time, independent of their AD carry being forgiven or freeze. Just straight up, if they don't completely stomp early game, and by stomp I mean plus 5k gold lead when they can take any fight and win, or just start doing barons and going deeper, they just get to mid game. If they don't get a sufficient advantage where it's really, really big, they just get stuck in mid game. They don't know how to move up wards. They don't sweep vision enough, and they don't set up for baron bait or going deep into inner turret pushes. I don't ever see them manipulating waves in a way where they can do a 4-1 split and try to get an inner turret. I never see nothing of that. So it's really complicated because they have good individuals, but they have this problem that's been present for so long. And
that seems to be the problem, though. It's only individuals. I don't see much synergy out of HCK at all. I mean, definitely in the HQ game, I didn't see much of Jankos and Banda's alleged really good synergy.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been playing together forever. Where is it? You know, let's see it. This is Worlds. Let's step it up.
We have to also mention that HQ, EDG, and even INTZ, I think all three of these teams have better mid-game macro / decision making.
For sure.
Yeah,
I said this in my. I did a video for Locking introducing the wildcard teams, and I said that the thing that made INTZ different from all the other teams is, first, they actually got hurt by the removal of lane swaps because they are actually good at macro. And I said, if they get a lead against one of these teams, you can expect them to be able to put on a good show in terms of macro and extend that lead. So they're already doing something that is much more complicated than. I mean, having good macro is more in depth and more. How do I explain it? Having good macro is a sign of a good team. And INTZ are showing that. For me, they're if they play against H2K and they get to mid game to the point where they're not too behind.
There's promising signs.
Yeah, they're much more promising than H2K. So H2K is a bit worrisome. I'd say G2 not as much. If G2 realize that they do not play around expect, period. You do not put expect on a carry roll and then give him gold. It's not going to work. You have never played that during summer. You've never
Sure,
done
but
that
how
during
much?
summer. Why are
How
you
much does
changing?
that hurt their draft though? Because I mean, you can't just not pick these power picks like Rumble, Jace, like these, like Cannon, like these picks are coming out, and like you can't just not have them in your pool. So maybe they're trying to play meta and it's not working, and maybe we'll see them, revert back to their more really bottom focused style. I would expect them to put a much bigger priority on getting better champions in bottom lane earlier in the draft.
Yeah, okay, so it's true. It's true that we're seeing a lot of top lane carries, but I think you can make an argument that you can win with bot lane focus. I mean, we've talked about this. What you need is you need focus on a side lane, and if top lane doesn't work for G2, I don't think it's coming to Worlds after a whole split where they focused bot lane. I don't think they should be changing their playstyle. And this reminds me a bit of like when I was on INTZ and we lost to Pain for the qualifiers for the CBLOL Championship. We kind of lost to ourselves because we changed our playstyle drastically. And that was a mistake. And I think G2 is kind of doing that, and they need to stop. Like, they just saw it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Even if it's less ideal that they're putting their top lane on a Poppy or on a tank, or a Shen, even if it's less ideal, I think it's better for them to play that way.
Okay, that's it. Any last words on G2 HDK?
On G2, I think I want to say they will bounce back, but maybe not the next game because they're going to play versus Rocks. But it is a good point. Yeah, but it is a good point that the meta is shifting to right now is towards top carries.
Yeah.
And maybe that's going to prevent them from making a deep run into Worlds, or maybe even getting out of groups. So this is a big worry right now.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We don't want to speculate too much on like one game for each team. So we'll see how this first week goes by, and our opinions might change by the next time we see you guys.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, let's remember, guys, that a lot of the discussion that we've had is based off one game per team, so a lot of things can change, a lot of things can be different. Don't crucify us if stuff if stuff is inaccurate. We're just trying to add some extra context to the Worlds experience.
They're gonna crucify us anyways.
So yeah. So I think for us, we're done. We're going to be trying to upload in this VOD as soon as possible, so that hopefully should be up on YouTube slightly later. We do have a standalone YouTube page for our content with the War Room, so that will be we'll release that obviously once the VOD is uploaded. So thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back doing this every day, I believe. So keep looking out for that, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Peace, guys.
Peace out.
I think it's stopping, so I need a few seconds. So.
Wait. Oh, also if that didn't record. Oh wait, we have Twitch mod. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just in case.